Now, I put together this intro webinar because there's a lot of talk about how when you have persistent pain, that a lot of it comes from your brain. And I love the fact that the language around persistent pain and chronic pain has evolved so much in the last 10 years, but we're still kind of down here. Okay. I remember when I went to my first pain doctor, um, I want to say it was in maybe 2017. I finally got into a pain clinic, and the language was still around, don't do this, don't do that. Let's see what we can figure out biomedically, and we go from there, right? Had prescription after prescription, and that was kind of how we looked at treating pain. Well, we've known now for quite a while that pain is a lot bigger than just our tissues, right? And one thing, if you can take away from this webinar, one thing, what I want you to know is that the pain level doesn't equal the tissue damage, right? And you even see that in acute injuries where you might roll your ankle, but then there's oncoming traffic or something's going on and your body blocks the pain to get you out of the way. Well, then you have the pain experience. So there's this varying degree of how pain is there to protect you, right? And depending on the level of protection you need, it can get higher or lower. And Lorimer Moseley did an awesome job of giving us this example when we were in the pain science class back in September of having people standing there, right? And there was one person on one end and they were the tissue, right? Let's say it's the ankle tendon, right? And then you've got the movement. I'm going to put it in the screen so you can see, right? So you've got the movement here and they have one, and he put one person right in the middle. And the person in the middle was the pain sensation. And when these tissues were healthy, the pain sensation hung out here, right? So the movement, the load, the intensity could go all the way to that kind of level of pain. And the pain was there to protect the tissue before damage started. Well, after there was damage, of course, pain goes way up here by the movement, right? So you have very little allowance for movement so that pain, that sensation, can protect the tissues from more damage. Now, this is in an acute situation, right? We've rolled our ankle. So as the ankle heals, and we get that healing aspect going on in the ankle, the mobility, the load, what happens is pain starts traveling back here. So you get a little bit more movement. It is there as a protector. What happens with persistent pain, and if you've taken one of the NOI group classes, you've probably heard this, that pain, with persistent pain, the sensation of it becomes overprotective, right? And it keeps that pain sensation way over here, even though the tissues are here and they're relatively fine. That's a part that we need to talk about. These tissues are relatively fine, but pain is being overprotective, and there's very little allowance for movement before there's a sensation that happens, right? So when we look at this new view of pain, we have to understand that the tissue damage doesn't equal the pain experience. There's a very wobbly board that can sit on. And there are so many things that affect that come into play, right? So it kind of evolved from that explain pain aspect where pain is overprotective. Now, I'm going to just say from back in when Explain Pain, the second edition came out in 2016, there's been a big progression of how to explain these things, of how to tell stories that make it understandable for the people who are living with pain. And I have to say, one of the best, no, I'm not getting paid by Noi Group. Disclaimer, I'm not getting paid by anybody. This is just me. But I really want, like, my goal is to be able to give information and help people find a better path back to wellness. Because when you're living with pain and all you're doing is searching for that fix, right? The right exercise, the right physiotherapist. Now, some physiotherapists are awesome. The ones that have the ability to connect all the different layers of living with pain are amazing. But the ones that are still looking for that one fix, that one weak muscle, that one out of alignment joint, tend to contribute the language that persists in people's minds that makes them overprotective and hypervigilant and looking for that. So that's a whole other tangent. Now, one thing that I want to point out, this book, Resolve Back Pain Handbook, is amazing. Okay. Now, I would love to say that it's amazing for everybody, but I will say the clients that I've worked with through this book, they've mentioned that it's very overwhelming. Because one of the things that happens, especially when you realize that your pain experience doesn't actually match up with the tissue damage, and that there's a varying degree of how that works, and that your body is trying to protect you and it's become overprotective, this isn't a message of it's all in your brain. Okay. It is not all in your brain. There is so much more to living with pain and what plays into that. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. But this Resolve Back Pain Handbook is amazing. It puts everything together for that understanding and giving you so many different tools to be able to connect with clients. So I highly recommend it. I will say I do have it for sale on my website because ordering one book from Australia is really expensive, right? So if you're interested, it is on my website, criticalmovementyyc.ca, and you can pick it up on there. Now, the other aspect is when we're talking to clients about their pain experience, one thing we need to get in our heads before anything else happens is that we need to listen. Okay? This isn't listening and trying to pick out that one thing and work on that. This is listening to their entire story. Now, I will say, within the Canadian medical system, this is not an easy thing to do. If you are a physiotherapist, chiropractor, osteopath, doctors here, really, they only have like 10, 15 minutes to discuss this with patients. Same thing, physiotherapists. Hopefully the intake session is a solid 45 minutes at least. But these pain stories, they take a while to discuss. The intake session that I do with clients is an hour and 15 minutes long. It does involve a lot of discussion back and forth of how pain has affected their life, of what their understanding of their pain experience is, what they've been told, and how that affects them. Right? We do go through a little movement assessment, and this isn't me judging or not judging, but measuring angles and talking about how one leg might be longer than the other, or, they sit a certain way. This is about natural movement. And I have my level 1 certification in MoveNat, and I took the natural movement fitness assessment from that and blended it into the movement assessment I do for their pain because I want to know what their bigger movement patterns are and how those are affected by their pain experience. Once I understand that, then we look at some exercises. Now, the exercises that I use, again, a good chunk of the movement snacks that I put in do come from a more natural movement fitness base. A lot of them come from critical alignment therapy. Okay. I have my certification in critical alignment therapy, and I found that it is integral to working with people who are living with pain. Because when you start talking to someone who is living with pain and they are exhausted from waking up and being in pain and trying to do the things that they need to do, let alone the things they want to do in their life, they're exhausted. And that mental load, not just the physical sensation of pain, which is hands down annoying in itself, but what ends up contributing greatly is that mental load of what happens when you're living with pain. And if you want to understand a little bit more, again, I do talk about it in the pain literacy course that I am starting next week. I also have an article about it in my Substack if you want to take a peek and get a little bit more understanding of what that mental load entails. But when you're living with that, we need to figure out what's contributing, right? How many different things? And it's not about stopping that, but it's about understanding when you can take a moment to pause, or if there's something you can do beforehand, or if you can plan things a little bit differently. And a lot of times, especially with women who have families who are living with pain, there's so much that has to be thought about throughout the day to try and keep things on track, that the day ends at a decent enough time so that you get enough rest. Okay. With that being said, sleep does play a big part in that pain experience. All right. So when we talk about the different learning aspects of how to treat persistent chronic pain, there's a lot of stuff out there right now, right? We've got the Noi group doing amazing things, okay? Apart from Resolve Back Pain Handbook. One of the new courses that they came out with is the embodiment of pain science. Neil Pearson, and please forgive me, I forgot her name. I know Neil Pearson because he is Canadian, a yoga therapist. Here, and I did their first intro, like their first launch of the course, and it finally starts to blend in that aspect of the mind body connection. Okay, because as I mentioned, the critical alignment therapy has been a huge part of how I work with clients, because when you can take their awareness, right, blend it, connect it into how they feel their body and pay attention to their body with their breath, that's always a huge tool. Because as I say, if you're living, you're breathing. And if you can take 30 seconds to connect to part of your breath, to give awareness to your body, and this blends directly into pain reprocessing therapy. There's a huge connection between all of these things. And I'd love to say there's one course that you really need to take, and apart from, what I'm trying to build, but with the Noi group, you've got that scientific understanding, the research behind you, the old view of pain versus the new view of pain. And I have to show you the picture of the new view of pain, because when I first saw it, it connects everything together, right? So as I find it here, so the old view of pain is this kind of direct line, right? Something hurts our body, we feel it, our pain sensation goes down to take us away and protect us. There's so much more involved. And this is a very tangent story, right? I go all over the place right now because Everything is so connected. One of the first things that I did in terms of certification after reading Explain Pain was my pain mentorship with Ben Cormack. And a big part of it, apart from all the research and the physiotherapy aspect of how we can look at different movements, was understanding how predictive processing works in the brain and how that plays a part. Because back in 2019, that was a big part of how that Explain Pain turned into, right, the neuroplastic and the overprotection and this amazing picture of the new view of pain, which, if you remember the old view of pain, straight line, new view of pain, right? We've got all of these aspects playing in, and they blend that into the protectometer, and it goes from there. And that's things that we're going to talk about in the pain literacy course, of how to discuss this with clients at a level and at a pace that they can understand and absorb and be able to translate into their daily life. Because a lot of times, especially in the last few years, where there has been more of an acceptance of pain is in the brain and the brain plays a part and it's a bigger picture, it's become very overwhelming. And I mentioned that, right? When I work with clients with Resolve Back Pain Handbook, if I just give this to them and they start reading it, it's like, it's so much. And I've worked with one client who was able to read it, because I've been working with her for 2 years. So she knew a lot of it, and it just, the pictures in it and the way they describe things made sense to her, because we've been talking about it for so long. So that part is a big part of it. Now, with the critical alignment, how I mentioned the mind body connection and that ability to recognize when your body's starting to become overprotective, pain reprocessing therapy blends right into that, right? It takes that somatic tracking and the critical alignment aspect of it and gives you the awareness and that ability to not panic. And that has to be something that is practiced. And one of the things that I talk about with clients is the 3 Ps: practice, patience, and paying attention. But paying attention plays a little bit of a gray area, because with persistent pain, we can become very hyper vigilant about how we're looking for pain and listening to those sensations and going, oh, there's that sensation, or, oh, I've been sitting a certain way, I'm going to have pain later. It's, oh, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to see if it's my exhale that allows my body to feel a little more connected. Or maybe it's my inhale that allows my body to feel like there's a freedom of movement there. These things take practice. These things also take patience. And that's one of the things I work with clients, is that ability to practice when you're feeling good, so that when those little things start popping up, you have that. There's the other aspect of that that goes right to the end, where you get a flare up. And that was where pain reprocessing therapy does come into play. And again, same thing in this book, Resolve Back Pain Handbook. They talk about building a plan for when there is a flare up, right? And we talk about that as well. It's, as you can tell, there's so many different aspects, and that new view of pain shows there's so many different things that play into what happens when we live with pain. And remember, I'm talking about persistent pain, and really persistent pain is anything that's been there longer than 3 months, because typically what they've found is that From 0 to 3 months is kind of that window where your tissues adapt and they start healing. And we want to be able to put in a little bit of load here and there and play with whatever injury it is so that it has that chance to heal. But there are times when pain ends up being very persistent. And when the nervous system starts playing its part of thinking, oh no, this is going to be horrible, or oh no, it's going to flare up, or I'm not going to be able to do this, and oh, I can't do this now, that overprotection gets stronger. That neuroplasticity, right? That phrase, the wires that fire together get stronger. And I totally messed that up. I apologize. But that that goes without saying that when there's the nervous system, that little unconscious thought going, oh, this is going to be worse. Oh, it's going to hurt more. Oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. That fear plays into the nervous system going, yeah, that's right. I better send more pain because we got to keep this in track. We got to not move. But we know better now. We know that movement is good. However, that is a graded movement, a graded experience as well, because you can't just go right back to what you were doing, obviously, because pain is still trying to protect you, which is a good thing. We need to build into that a little more where and this is again where critical alignment comes back into play because with critical alignment, we work on that first phase of acknowledging, being aware of what we're feeling in the body, of building that connection with our breath so that the body can start to relax. We can feel how there's a calm, there's a grounding, there's maybe a lightness in our movement. And then we build movement into it, right? So we're laying on the floor and we move to feel for how we can listen to the whispers in the body. We're not moving so that we're like, oh yeah, that's the edge. It's okay. There's a little bit of a whisper there. My body's starting to talk. I'm going to hang out here and I'm going to keep doing the movement and then I'm going to take a break. It's a temporary thing, and we're not listening for the screams, we're listening for the whispers, and we're building this awareness of ease of movement. And we do this throughout the skeleton, from the neck to the thoracic spine, from the legs through the pelvis into the lower back, from the arms through the shoulders into the thoracic, into the rib cage area. That connects to the thoracic spine. It affects the neck. It affects everything, right? We work on all these different connections. We do rotations, those connections. There's so many things that in critical alignment we can work on that builds that awareness of pain reprocessing therapy, that builds on that awareness of everything that affects us throughout the day, that new view of pain, and we can play with all these different parts. Now, here's the thing. When we talk to clients and patients about this, all of that is very overwhelming. So when you're talking to clients, it is very much that you are listening, right? You're listening. They want to be heard. And when you can pick up on one or two things and say, okay, well, you mentioned this. I have a question about it. And we work into that because one of the strongest things that happens when you have persistent pain, and I mean, we all have it because we were brought up in this society where if something hurts, there's something wrong and it's one thing and it needs to be found and it needs to be fixed, whether it's a joint that's asymmetrical or a muscle that's weak or a muscle that's tense or even fascia that is apparently holding on to a knot. Now, there's a lot of manual therapies that do help. But how I see those manual therapies helping is that they're bringing that awareness, that level of safety, that connection to that area. I could go on for hours. In fact, that's why the pain literacy course is 6 hours long because there's so many levels you can see. Like if I was to make a cake on how many levels pain affects us and how many different things affect pain, oh, it could be a delicious cake because every level would have icing in the middle, and I love icing. So either way, there's so many things that play a part. So when we're talking, we need to just pick out the one or two things that we can connect with our clients, with our patients, and build from there. Because they need to be contributors to this, because it's them that's doing all this work to build their path back to wellness. So, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about getting this understanding out there, and especially with health practitioners who have never lived with pain. It's an aspect that creates a disconnect, because as much as you learn about pain neuroscience, pain reprocessing therapy, there's a level of understanding of connection that, and I don't want you to have to go out there and live with pain because it sucks. But I think there's a way to communicate, to be able to have that empathy and connect with your client or your patient to be able to build this together. And it's so amazing when it does work. I mean, I had one client who I started with about a year ago, and we worked together for about 9 months. And my goal, just in the back of my head, was for them to be able to get back to the activities they love. And they were, at the beginning, they were like, no, that's never going to happen. Like, those activities are done. It's never going to happen again. Well, I heard back from them about a month ago, and they did it. They didn't just do their activity once, which at the end, when we closed things up, they were like, yeah, I think I'm going to try it, at least once this year. They went back multiple times, and the conditions were great, and they just were trying to just hold back, and they didn't, and they kept going, and they were able to do it. And it was amazing. Anyways, those are the things that like give me the goosebumps and like, yes, this stuff works. So with that being said, I want to introduce the pain literacy training. Now, this first 6-hour course, it talks a lot about what I talked about tonight. We don't go through, but we draw a lot from the Resolve Back Pain Handbook. We draw a few aspects from pain reprocessing therapy. But the biggest thing is we blend it all together in how to connect with clients, with patients, because you can know all of it. You could memorize supercharged explain pain, but until you can be able to connect with clients on that and give them that personal connection of why this matters to them, and that it's not just that we're looking for that one weak muscle, then it works, right? So if you are interested, the course does start next October. October starts next week. So next Wednesday night, it's going to be live online, and it goes from 6:30 to 8:30 Mountain Standard Time, Mountain Daylight Time, because I don't think our time changes until November. But with that, it's 3 weeks, and we do 2 hours each week. And you're going to get homework that will get you thinking about and trying to use the stuff that we talk about in the sessions. And then we discuss it a little bit. But there's so much to learn. Like, I'm trying to condense it into 6 hours. And I've done it once already. I ran the program back in March, live in person, and it was amazing. We had so many good discussions. So I really want this to go online. I spoke at the International Association of Yoga Therapists back in June, and there was so much great feedback about how we discuss things, about, everything we just discussed here, but we were able to do it in a longer time frame. So with that being said, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'm going to take a look, but I look forward to seeing you in the course, or if you if you are living with pain, please reach out. There's a number of things on my website. As I mentioned at the beginning, my goal is to be able to reach people, and I don't want finances to be a hindrance, an obstacle. So on my website, I have a 5-day program, 5 days to change your pain. It's 20 minutes a day. It's free. It's no cost. And once you get through that, if you have any questions, just let me know. But one of the things in that is that you get a code for weekly, no cost support through the Go Get Fit app. And I've been supporting people with that Go Get Fit app now for about 2 years. And it's great because you put in what your activities are, you mark them off when they're complete. You don't just mark them off, but you mark off how much effort you put into it and the mood that you had. So I can look back and I can see that, and I can give you little encouragement. I can point you towards different articles or things to listen to, or even just kind of tweak and say, hey, this hasn't been working for a couple weeks. How about you try this? So it's a really great, again, free resource. And I don't want finances to be a hindrance. When you live with pain, there are so many obstacles, time being one of them. So I'm going to wrap it up because, as I mentioned earlier, I could talk about this for hours. But with the 6-hour pain course, I am creating a second level to build more of that critical alignment therapy aspect into it, because I do believe that that is the one thing that I tend to have that just connects everything that I've learned and puts it all together. So I hope you have a wonderful evening if you've been watching this through the day, because there will be a recording. Please set up, comment below. Let me know what you thought. And if you have experience living with pain, or you're a health professional who works with people who live with pain, because I think we all do, please let me know. Otherwise, have a great night, and I hope to chat with you in the future.